I've got the first ROG Ally with Hall effect joysticks, but there is a catch. I'll show you how I did it, and then you can decide whether you should too. So let's get started. Here's what we need. So we're going to need a Phillips screwdriver number 00 and number 1. We're going to need a plastic pry tool, a guitar pick, a pair of tweezers, and you'll need a specific set of Hall effect joysticks. Links in the description. Let's move on to taking apart our device. So we need to remove the back cover. We need a Phillips number 1 size screwdriver. We're going to loosen and remove the 5 screws that I've labeled with the red circles. And then we're just going to loosen the one that's in the bottom middle that I've labeled in yellow. This screw isn't removable, so it'll stay with the case. The screws are massive and they're all the same size. Don't worry about mixing them. Make sure you're using the number 1 Phillips so you don't strip the screws. The last one you unscrew until it just spins in place. Now we can go ahead and remove our back plate, so you can use a pry tool or a guitar pick. I do recommend a guitar pick, it's going to work better. I recommend using the tip of the guitar pick to pry up, and it should pop out pretty easily. This is actually one of the easiest devices I've taken apart. Now we can go ahead and lift the back plate off, and there's no ribbon cable, so don't worry about that. So let's set that aside, and now we can access the inside. Before we get started, let's do a quick overview. So our first step is going to be unplugging the battery cable. Once we're done that, we're going to work on removing the joystick boards and modules. To do that, we're going to lift the tabs and pull out the ribbon cables, remove the screws for the joystick boards, pull off the joystick caps, and unscrew and remove the old analog modules. Then replace them with the new Hall effect modules and just reassemble. So let's get started with the battery cable. So just grab it firmly and pull straight out. Now we'll start with the right joystick. So let's lift up the tabs. You can use a pry tool or your fingernail and just pull them out. I unplugged this one in the video, but you don't actually need to. It's actually pointless to unplug it. Now we can take out this little ribbon cable. So lift the tab at the back, grab a pair of pliers and pull it out. Sorry for my focus. Now that we've got the ribbon cables out, we're going to remove the 4 screws that I have pictures here. So you're just going to need a 00 Phillips head screwdriver. So let's go ahead and take those out. You don't need to worry about mixing these up or the ones from the other side. They're all the same size, so don't worry about it. They are very small, so make sure you put them somewhere safe where they don't get lost. Now we can lift up the board. Just make sure to help out that ribbon cable through so it doesn't get caught. Now we can flip it over and take a look. So this is the board for your joystick and rumble. So we're just going to pull the cap off. You can just pull it straight out. And now you can see the stock module. So if you look closely, it says ALPs on there. So these are ALP joysticks. Here's the Hall effect beside the original. As you can see, they're the exact same size. Now we can go ahead and take out our old module, so lift up the tab, and we're going to take out the 2 screws. Make sure to set them aside. They are different than the rest of the screws and they're very small. Now just gently pull it out, use pliers or your fingers if you want. Then put the Hall effect one in and use your pliers to push it in and then push the tab down. Now we can put the 2 screws back in, and now this analog module is ready to go. So now what we need to do is we need to take our cap and we're going to put it back on. So take a look at it. There is a specific way to put it on. If you take a look at the hole as well as the stick, they are wider one way than they are the other. So just make sure that that's lining up on the hole and the stick and you should be good to go. So to put it on, you just need to line it up and then press it in and it should spin freely. And now we can reassemble this side. So make sure that that tiny ribbon cable goes through the hole, otherwise it's going to be pushed underneath. And then we can line up the board and push it in. If you look at the side there's 2 plastic clips. Make sure those are lined up and push it straight down. Now we can put our screws in. We'll just take a couple seconds for the screws to magically appear on the board. And then we're going to go ahead and plug everything back in. So I'm going to plug in the cord that I didn't actually need to unplug. And then we'll do the small one. So just slot it in and then put the tab down. Don't forget the tabs. Same thing with the large one, and this side is done. So let's move on to the other side. This side is mostly the same, except it has one larger ribbon cable. So lift the tabs and pull out the ribbon cables. We'll start with the small one. For this larger one, you'll want to remove the tape and then pull it out. It's large enough that you could probably just use your fingers to pull it out. So this time we're going to leave that plug with the 2 cords and we're just going to take out the bottom ribbon cable. It should slide right out. Now that we've removed all the ribbon cables, we can go ahead and take out all the screws. And when you're removing the board, you could also use the joystick to help push it out. Just be gentle. And now that we've got it out, it's going to be very similar to the other side. Go ahead and take off the joystick cap by just pulling it straight out, and then we're going to unscrew the 2 screws and unplug the ribbon cable. Just gently pull it out, put the Hall effect one in, and make sure you push the tab down and screw it back down. I'm sure you can guess the next step. Let's put the cap back on, make sure that it's lined up just like the other side. And then what we can do is we can put it back in, make sure that the clips line up, and then we can screw it back down. So same thing as the other side, we're going to go ahead and put our ribbon cables back in. So make sure that the tab is lifted up and then plug it in and put the tab back down. Once you've got all the ribbon cables plugged back in, you've completed swapping the sticks, and all we need to do is just reassemble the device. Now we can go ahead and plug our battery back in and then put the device back together. One thing to note is that the device will not power on until all 3 bottom screws are tightened in. To secure the shell, start in a corner and just start pressing it together until you hear a click. This should click together without too much effort. If it feels like there's too much effort, it might not be lined up. Now that we've got it clicked back on, let's go ahead and put in our 6 screws. It doesn't really matter what order you put the screws in, but I probably would have done it a little bit different. Maybe put the bottom middle one in first. Aside from that, it's pretty straightforward. Now we can go ahead and power on our device and test it out. Now that we've got our device powered on, let's head over to gamepadtester.com and let's see if our joysticks are working. Moving the joystick activated the controller, so that's a good sign. So let's move the joysticks around, let's test it out, see if it's working. So we got the left side working. So let's go ahead and give it a circularity test. So let's spin it around. You can see the left joystick is very similar to the stock sticks. They get around 10%. And the right joystick seems to be a lot more accurate. It's a little bit shallow on the edges, but it's working well. So if you look at the left one, it's not quite centered, the left joystick. Now I'm going to explain what's going on here. So if I push the trigger, if I push it all the way down, you can see that it's starting to have some interference. So this would be the Hall effect triggers affecting the Hall effect joysticks. So this is the catch I was talking about. Now to fix this, we can go to the left stick and we can turn up the inner dead zone to about 20%, and we're going to test it again. Now you can see that the left stick is centered and there isn't any movement when we're pressing the left trigger all the way down. And the movement seems to be fine. If we test the circularity, it's actually better. So it seems like that interference is what was causing the poor circularity as well. As now it's matching the right stick, which doesn't seem to be impacted by any interference. This is due to the placement of the joysticks on the board. The right joystick did seem to have trouble reaching the edges unless you push a little harder, so you can fix this by adjusting the outer threshold, but this is really up to you. I've never really had an issue with it the way it was, but now you can see it's reaching the edge a little bit better. So you can play with this and tweak this, and this works on the regular joysticks as well. So I'm going to really quickly show you what's going on with the left joystick. So this is the trigger itself. As you can see, there's the magnet in between those 2 screws, and when you press it down, it gets picked up by a sensor on the board. So this is the board. You can see in between those 2 metal posts there's a little sensor. It's labeled U7102. So this is where the magnet on the trigger gets pushed towards and detected. And those 2 metal posts are actually where the joystick is being mounted to, so it's directly on the other side, which is why we're getting some of the interference. So I'll be working with a few other people to see if we can isolate that joystick from the interference so that it can be used without having to turn up the dead zone, which isn't a great solution. And I'll keep you guys up to date on how that goes and if I find a way to fix this. So I tested a couple of games to see if a trigger press on the left side would actually interfere with the left joystick. So the first game that I tested was Hollow Knight. So as you can see, the stick is working fine and my dead zone is set to 0 on the left stick. So I'm going to press the left trigger and I'll see if it activates. As you can see on this particular game, it's not actually having any impact. And I haven't changed any of the game's controller settings. This is just what comes with the game. The second game that I tested was Red Dead Redemption 2. So I have again the dead zone at 0 and I haven't touched the controllers on the game. So if I press the trigger, it sometimes detects, sometimes doesn't. The first time you can see it didn't. But I'll try it again here and you can see that he's moving now. So this is at 0. I didn't bother filming it, but I tested at 5% and 10% dead zone. At 5% he still moved a little bit, at 10% there's no movement. One thing to note that at an inner dead zone of about 10%, you probably won't see this issue on any games. If you set it to 20%, there is no interference. So there you have it. Now we've tested out Hall effect joysticks on the ROG Ally. So does it work? Yes. Is it working perfect? No. Is there a workaround? Well, yes. Currently you can set the dead zone at 20% and it'll work fine. While not a great solution, the stock sticks that I actually had to set the same thing because they were drifting at center. So for me, it doesn't really make a difference. So that's where it stands right now. Is this something that's going to be worth it? That's going to be up for you to decide. I will leave a link with some instructions in the video description for purchasing the joysticks. They can be purchased on the OneXplayer store. I'll also leave a link on AliExpress for where you can buy the actual joysticks for the ROG Ally, the non-Hall effect ones, which won't cost you very much to replace if you ever need to replace your joysticks. So although today's video wasn't exactly the result we wanted, I hope that it was entertaining and informative, and let's see in the future if we can get this working without any interference. So that's going to do it for today's video. Check out my other ROG Ally tutorials or any of my other handheld content. Alright, well thank you for watching.